The first time Arai's Kaleem saw his daughter faint from hunger, something inside him broke in a way that no sound could ever describe. It happened on a bright, ordinary afternoon, the kind where sunlight filled every corner of the city as if nothing in the world could be wrong. Cars moved, people laughed, offices buzzed, but in the back seat of a dusty sedan parked under a fading tree, a 7-year-old girl slowly slumped sideways, her tiny hand slipping from the lunchbox that had nothing inside it. Arai's froze. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Then panic struck like lightning. He rushed out, lifted her into his arms, and whispered her name over and over again as if saying it enough times could bring her back to him. His voice trembled, his hands shook, and his heart, already carrying too much, felt like it was collapsing under a weight he could no longer bear. Right there, in the middle of a city that never stopped moving, a father realized he was losing control of the only thing that mattered in his life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of those who keep going even when life pushes them to the edge, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Because stories like this remind us that no act of kindness is ever truly small. Arai's Kaleem had not always been a struggling driver counting coins at the end of each day. There was a time when his life had been stable, even hopeful. He had once worked as a mid-level operations manager at a logistics company, someone respected, someone who wore clean shirts, spoke with confidence, and returned home every evening to a warm meal and a loving family. But life has a way of shifting without warning. A sudden company shutdown had taken his job. Medical bills had taken his savings. And grief, quiet, heavy, relentless grief, had taken his wife. After that, everything unraveled. What remained was a man trying to rebuild himself from nothing, while raising a daughter who still believed her father could fix everything. He couldn't. But he tried. Every single day. Driving had been his last option. He borrowed money to get an old car, signed up as a private driver for hire, and began working long, punishing hours. Some days he skipped meals so his daughter, Meher, wouldn't have to. Some nights he slept in the car between shifts because going home meant facing bills he couldn't pay. Still, he smiled for her. Still, he told her stories. Still, he promised that things would get better, even when he didn't know how. The day everything changed began like any other. Arai's received a high-paying booking request from a corporate office. The instructions were clear: pick up a CEO from a luxury business district and drive him to multiple meetings across the city. The payment was higher than usual, enough to cover a week's expenses, maybe more. He accepted instantly. What he didn't know was that this ride would test not just his patience, but his dignity. The CEO, Xavier Ralph, stepped out of the glass building with the kind of presence that made people move out of the way without being asked. Tall, sharply dressed, and surrounded by an invisible aura of authority, he carried himself like someone who had never been told no. He glanced at Arai's briefly, just one look, and then slid into the back seat without a word. From the very beginning, the tone was set. Xavier didn't greet him. Didn't acknowledge him. Didn't even bother to make eye contact again. To him, Arai's wasn't a person, just a service. Just a driver. The ride began in silence, but not the comfortable kind. Every few minutes, Xavier would make a call, his voice sharp, demanding, impatient. He spoke about million-dollar deals, delayed shipments, incompetent employees, and expectations that had to be met, no excuses. At one point, he snapped loudly over the phone, then ended the call with visible irritation. Moments later, he leaned forward slightly and said, without any politeness, that the air conditioning wasn't strong enough. Arai's adjusted it immediately. Then came complaints about the route. Then about traffic. Then about the car itself. Each comment was a small cut. Each word carried a tone that reduced Arai's to something less than human. But Arai's said nothing. He had learned long ago that survival sometimes meant swallowing pride. The day stretched on. Stop after stop. Meeting after meeting. Xavier never once asked his name. Never once said thank you. At one point, during a brief pause between appointments, our eyes received a call from Meher's school. His heart tightened instantly. He hesitated before answering, knowing Xavier disliked interruptions, but he picked up anyway. What he heard on the other end made his blood run cold. Meher had collapsed again. This time at school. She hadn't eaten properly. The teacher's voice was concerned, urgent. Arai's hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, everything around him faded. He needed to go to her. Right now. He turned slightly and tried to explain the situation, his voice calm but desperate beneath the surface. He said his daughter was unwell and asked if he could take a short detour, just a few minutes, to check on her. Xavier didn't even look up from his phone. His response was cold, immediate, and absolute. No. There was a meeting. Important people were waiting. Delays were unacceptable. Our eyes felt something crack inside him. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But deeply. He nodded quietly and continued driving. Because he had no choice. Or at least, that's what he believed at that moment. The rest of the ride passed in a blur of tension and silent anguish. Arai's mind was no longer on the road, it was at the school, beside his daughter, wishing he could be there, hating himself for not being there. By the time the final drop-off came, the sun had begun to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the city. Xavier stepped out, paused briefly, and finally spoke a complete sentence directed at Arais. Next time, be more professional. Then he walked away. No acknowledgement. No understanding. No humanity. Arais sat there for a long moment after he left. Then he drove straight to the school. Meher was conscious when he arrived, but weak. She smiled when she saw him. That broke him more than anything else. Because even in that state, she smiled. He held her close, apologizing over and over, promising things would change, promising he would never choose work over her again. That night, sitting beside her as she slept, Arais made a decision. One that would change everything. The next morning, he didn't turn on his driver app. Instead, he opened an old email account he hadn't touched in years. Inside it were messages, documents, contacts, fragments of a life he thought was gone. Before everything fell apart, Arais had been working on something. A logistics optimization model. A system designed to reduce costs, improve delivery times, and streamline operations using predictive algorithms. At the time, no one had taken it seriously. But Arais had believed in it. He just never had the chance to finish it. Until now. For weeks, he worked tirelessly. During the day, he took minimal driving jobs just to survive. At night, he built. He coded, researched, tested, failed, and tried again. Meher would sit beside him sometimes, drawing quietly, occasionally looking up and asking if things were getting better. He would nod. Because now, for the first time in a long time, he believed they might. What Arais didn't know was that the very company Xavier Ralph ran, Ralph Global Logistics, was facing a major operational crisis. Delays. Losses. Client dissatisfaction. Their existing systems were outdated, inefficient, and costing them millions. Xavier was under pressure. Massive pressure. Which made him even more impatient, even more ruthless. One afternoon, Arais made a bold move. He submitted his model anonymously through the company's open innovation portal, a feature rarely used, mostly ignored. He didn't expect much. But he hoped. Days passed. Then something unexpected happened. The system flagged his submission. Automatically. Because it outperformed all existing models by a significant margin. It caught attention. Then more attention. Soon, it reached the top. Xavier's desk. At first, he skimmed through it with the same impatience he had for everything else. But then he slowed down. Then he stopped. Then he read it again. The numbers didn't lie. The solution was brilliant. Simple, yet powerful. Efficient in ways his team had failed to achieve for years. There was only one question. Who created it? The submission was anonymous, but required a contact for follow-up. A phone number. Xavier called it. When RI's answered, he recognized the voice instantly. And for the first time, silence filled both ends of the call in a way that felt heavy with realization. The meeting that followed was nothing like their first encounter. RI's walked into the same glass building, but this time, he wasn't invisible. Xavier stood up when he entered. That alone said everything. The conversation was different too. Respectful. Curious. Almost humbled. Xavier asked questions. Listened carefully. Acknowledged the brilliance of the work. And slowly, piece by piece, the image he had built of RI's as just a driver shattered completely. Because the man sitting in front of him wasn't just a driver. He was a thinker. A builder. A father who had fought against circumstances that would have broken most people. And he had still created something extraordinary. Xavier made an offer. A major one. RI's didn't accept immediately. Because for him, this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. About being seen. About never being treated as invisible again. He set his conditions. Flexible hours. Time for his daughter. And a role where he could continue to grow, not just serve. Xavier agreed. Without hesitation. Because now he understood something he hadn't before. Value doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it sits quietly behind a steering wheel. Weeks later, RI stood in a new office, his office, watching as his system began transforming the company's operations. Losses reduced. Efficiency improved. Reputation restored. And for the first time in a long time, life felt stable again. Meher was healthier. Happier. Her laughter filled their small apartment in a way that made it feel like home again. And RI's finally felt like himself. But the story didn't end there. Because the biggest change wasn't in RI's. It was in Xavier. He began noticing things. The way he spoke to people. The way he treated those who worked for him. The invisible lines he had drawn between important and unimportant. And slowly, he started changing. Not overnight. But genuinely. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one realization, to remind us that every person carries a story we cannot see. And every story deserves respect. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness, resilience, and seeing people for who they truly are, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. And before this story comes to an end, here's something special for you. Comment, kindness wins, if you believe no one should ever be judged by their circumstances. Because in the end, life has a quiet way of revealing the truth. The man you ignore today might be the one who changes everything tomorrow.